Mandisa Mashego, political activist. We're leading up to 2024 now, and what's becoming clear when you look at social media is, as much as we claim to be a political country, a lot of people, especially young people, still by and large just do not understand the importance of voting. They don't think it works. Some people think there's something wrong with the political structures, the constitution, etc. In your opinion, where are we going wrong? What are we missing as a nation? And maybe you can also touch on some of the work that you've been doing.
Yes, it's true. I mean, we have at least, I think the last time I checked, around 17 million people who are a combination of people who do not register to vote, have never registered to vote. They're 18, they have an ID, they're South African. They should be registered to participate and actually vote, right? And then within that 17 million, we have another batch of people who are just registered to vote, are on the voters' roll, but do not participate. And so, yes, it's a very big problem because you can't live in a society that you don't participate in terms of decision-making, in terms of the impact, in terms of influencing decisions that have a negative impact in your life, in order to convert that negative impact to something positive that is going to be constructive and useful to you, you know? And so the passivity is actually also contributing to the problems that our democratic system already has. Our democratic system is very problematic in South Africa. It is very much mismatched with majority of communities, if you can call them constituencies in the sense. And so there's a lot wrong with the system itself. And yes, of course, I'm part of I don't know whether to call it a movement, but I call it a lobby because we're really just still a lobby. We haven't started doing groundwork of many organizations, but primarily led by the New Nation movement, also under the banner of the Citizens Parliament, which basically won the case in 2020 in the Constitutional Court to have the Electoral Act in its entirety overturned and declared unconstitutional as per the current version of the South African Constitution, because it is unconstitutional. Part of the reason why it answers the question that you just asked. Because of its unconstitutionality and all the technicalities that make it unconstitutional, we then have, find ourselves with a population that is essentially either, just not interested or apathetic, so to speak, or just doesn't see any point, or simply just doesn't understand what's going on.
I'm listening to you and you're already throwing big English words, constituency, the type of work that you're doing, electoral, this and that. For me, at least, part of the concern is that for the majority, number one, they already struggle with English. And now we're speaking big English, which it seems our political systems, our constitution uses. Where do we start just from an understanding, I think, for the average person? Where do we start? What is politics? What is the constitution? What political system do we have that you guys are looking to potentially dismantle or rearrange?
So education is a big part of it, kufundisa abantu, just basic concepts, because you have to start with basic concepts. If you've got 17 million people who are just not participating, for whatever other reasons that I didn't mention, it's obvious that there's not only a lack of understanding, there's also just not seeing the benefit of participating. And so the education element, which is a big part of why, ukufundisa abantu just about how do you, even if you're not a taxpayer, like you're an 18-year-old who's just fresh out of matric, and you haven't even had a holiday job. Like in our times, it was very common to have holiday jobs. So you started understanding the relationship between effort and result, and you also started understanding the relationship between what's happening in your community, the economy, and just your own needs, taking care of your own needs. So we have high unemployment as well. Youth unemployment is the worst at around 70%, and then the next batch is obviously black females that are mostly unemployed. About 50% of black women unemployed, and then the other batch that's employed, over 50% of the employed black women earn 3,500, if not less. And so when you have a population with that dynamic, it doesn't matter how beautiful or even appropriate or suitable, let me say, your constitution and all your laws that are under the constitution are, they're just not going to participate. And so, yes, you're right, the language goes above people's heads, because the way we in fact, there is no education happening, even an education on democracy, governance, elections, etc. Why elections? Why democracy? Why government? Why this form of government? The fact that there's no education about all of those components from a very early age. I mean, some of my beliefs are that it must start at ECD level, because a little child, early childhood development, like preschool. In fact, as soon as a child is two years old, can learn very difficult mathematical and scientific concepts. The Japanese are doing it. And so if a child can start to learn lateral thinking concepts that are mathematically presented, what makes you think a child will not be able to understand social concepts? In fact, children understand those concepts much quicker than adults because they've got less noise in their brains. And so the education, and not education as in uye esikolweni, uhlale benchini, uhlale deskini, ulalela utishera, but basically being taught even at home by your parents, community formations, what we used to call street committees back then when we were fighting against the apartheid system, used to be very helpful to us young kids who were basically referred to as stone throwers when, we'd literally attack cops' vans and all of that, and the army vans with stones that are like little cobbles that wouldn't really do anything. But we understood enough as kids because it would be explained to us street by street. It would be explained to us by our parents. Our parents would sit us down because we would ask, why singaye esikolweni? Why are the schools shut down for the whole year? Schools were shut down also in the late 70s. It wasn't just June 16. They were shut down for a few years after, 1976, and a couple of years after that, there was no schooling, by and large, in black communities. And then again in the 80s, 83, 84, there was no schooling. And so children would want to know, why are we not going to school? Why singaye enziloku? Why singaye enziloku, And then parents would explain to them, the reason you're not going to school is because sonke singabantu abamnyama right now, siqindezelwe ngomthetho we-apartheid, wamabhunu, wabelungu, wama-British, etc. Why are they doing that? So it starts with basic education, which is where the New Nation Movement and Citizens Parliament is going to basically start with this project since we won the court victory. And by the way, we didn't win that court victory as New Nation Movement. It's the people of South Africa that won that court victory, because in any event, it was not even supposed to go to court. I always repeat that. It was not supposed to go to court. These were agreements that were made. And this is part of the reason why, your earlier question about the impact of people abanga participate government yabo or governance yabo. That's exactly the impact. Kuzoba nezinto neyinqumo ezithathwayo at the level of government and even business, right, on the economic and political level. Lezi nqumo ziyothathwa just to manage you and to program you. You like the decision that was taken during the Kodesa negotiations to say, only for the first 5 years, 1994 to 1999, must this current system of governance, in terms of the current format of the Electoral Act, must that govern. After 1999, or from 1999, the 1999 elections, we were supposed to have a much more direct democracy, which means people were supposed to be able to then vote for individuals and not for political parties. But because abantu bebangayazi leyonto, either because that information was not out in the open, as you know, sunset clauses, as they were called, the agreements that were reached at Kodesa 1 and Kodesa 2, because there were two sets of Kodesa before the 94 elections. Those sunset clauses were the decisions and the resolutions, as we are told. But up to today, you can Google them. You'll never find a document that talks to you about that. And so the secrecy and the lack of transparency, of decisions that are taken at a high level by people who have either political influence, which means political power, or leaders that are leading the economy and are, a concentrated capitalist economy. Those decisions were taken secretly for reasons not beneficial to the majority. And so people didn't even know how the system was supposed to change. Had people known that, had there been transparency from the early 90s, running up to the agreements with Kodesa, and then running up to the first election, and people were told that, Mamelani, siyovota, kodwa njengoba siyovota, the first 5 years sivota kanje, sivotela ama-party, but after that, kumele sikwazi ukuba ne-mixture yama-party nama-individuals, nina enizikhethela wona, ngobani, it's much easier to hold Penuel accountable as an individual than it is to hold Penuel as a president of penuelpoliticalparty.com. Right? Because then he can go and mobilize and start all sorts of arguments and politicize into a wrong, and then eventually abantu bayibone ngathi isi right, like untshontsha imali. After that, uthi hayi ngiyantshontsha ngoba phela bengisejele for 20 years, so I have a right to steal.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you mentioned street committees.
Yeah.
To umuntu olalele, number one, yini politiki in its most basic fundamental understanding of yours. Yini politiki, do you think we, perhaps outside of education on such platforms, do you think we need to go back to setting up street committees, other committees elsewhere, to get ingane even in families to slowly begin understanding the reason there's a stolo silap, the reason the reason you have to go to school? You can now have a conversation, whether in your street or whatever, and then take it up. I mean, I believe that's what branches were meant to be, and it seems again that's also been lost. What is epolitiki, and do you think we need to dismantle it and go back to the most basic elements of it?
Look, we are in a situation now where the majority overwhelmingly are not engaged in the political system. So that alone, just that 17 million alone, the high number of unemployed people, the crime, the poverty, that alone is a reason enough for us to go back. Not necessarily even go back, but rather ukuthi sizame ukuthi sithole new ways of rearranging our democracy. So definitely imfundiso, like education needs to start happening at a more micro level. We need to be able to start educating parents, community leaders at a very micro level, not even ward-based, but like different sections, Zama wards, so that people start explaining to one another and brainstorming with each other. What do we think is going to the best thing? I mean, one of the topics, and we spoke about it earlier before we started recording, I think, and one of the hot topics now is, should we be going back to more indigenous methods of managing crime? Should we be going back to more indigenous African methods of the justice system? Because the justice system currently is not working, we all know. Udinga imali to go to court, except for maybe maintenance court and maybe small claims court. I can't remember the others, CCMA, those kinds of, very, very few. But where it matters most, where justice is needed the most, where there's economic injustice, by and large South Africa is an economic injustice as a whole, people cannot access high courts. High court is cost at least 50,000 rand for one sitting. For you to fight over mhlawumbe, there's a dispute, a property or a dispute, a mali, and all of that. Yes, you can open a case for free. That argument will come up. Go to a police station, give a case. But the amount of knowledge, information, and skill that you require to chase the police just for ukuthi bayiphenye icase yakho, bayi-investigate. Maybe qeda ukuyi-investigate, bayi-investigate kahle, bangayi-investigate ngendlela engeke ikwazi ukuma enkantolo. And then bayithathe bayise e-court, bayise ku-prosecutor. A prosecutor is supposed to represent the public, by the way. It's like a public defender. I think that's what they call it in America. I like the Americans better because we might think they're stupid, but they call things exactly what they are. Tina snabo prosecutor. I mean, nobody knows what the hell a prosecutor is. If you just say this is somebody who's supposed to defend you as a member of the public for free, after most people don't know that you can investigate your own case and take the evidence to the police officer who's investigating. Most people don't even know with Mauqetu case, you are entitled to the contact number, cell number, the investigating officer, because if a case yakho investigatwanga kahle, uzoyiluza a court. If ama witnesses awalandwanga on time, thola ama statement, ama evidence, ama video, intonton, izinto ezibhalwe phansi, abantu eyewitnesses, abantu abayibonile into yenzeka, uzoyiluza. And so the need to look, there was never an education, like I'm trying to constantly explain this, that nama South Africans ngisho umuntu ofana nami. The only reason I knew about sunset clauses is because I'm just naturally a curious person, and I've always been, even as a child. And of course, you get criminalized when you are like me, especially moment is fazan. You get told that you are papa. When you want to empower yourself with information, knowledge, capacity, skills, etc., you get told that you are papa. You get told that, so there's this dominating, we inherited this toxic dominance culture from obviously our colonial past, which still lives with us through neocolonialism and capitalism and imperialism. And so the entire system needs to be overhauled. Yes, abantu bakithi kumele bafundiswe ngelwimi labo as well. So we also need to go back, people like me who are not fluent in their mother tongues, need to work with indigenous communities very closely so that they can help us to translate lesilungu lesisethu that we've been programmed into, and actually help us to say, okay, mangikhuluma nabantu abakhuluma iSotho, i-constitution ngeSotho yilokho. ngesipedi lokhu ngesivenda ngesishangane ngesizulu ngesixhosa ntonton ngesindebele, you know, democracy ngesintu ilokhu, because you must understand that democracy is not unique. In fact, democracy originates, in my understanding, in Africa, because you know, the Greek interpretation of the word democracy is people plus rule, which means people must rule. So people can. Demos is people in Greek, and the crassy part refers to ruling, governing, and so which means people must govern, which is basically what people will relate. I don't know if the younger generation relates to the Freedom Charter, but it's something they can Google. There's different versions of it, but they can Google it. And that's where the concept in South Africa became popular of, you know, people must rule. But before that, we know that people must rule because vele as abantu abamnyama, you didn't need an ID, you didn't need to register to vote to participate in democracy. Secondly, a big part of democracy is justice and freedom and the ability to engage freely without fear, without intimidation. Democracy.
Sorry to get in there. I'm just thinking, Jobokulum, about the way we were. Terms like indaba, lekgotla, for example, that was getting people to sit together and come up with solutions on their own.
Which still happens in so-called traditional peri-urban and rural areas where you have induna. So you do have a structure, right? So it doesn't mean because it's an African system or indigenous system of justice, there's no structure. But I want to just finish the point I was making about governance and democracy. Democracy is just a system of governance which basically speaks to our original African way of governing, where you didn't need to make an appointment to your attender, where the local induna chief or whatever you might call them, or queen or the head of that area in terms of, you know, the traditional leadership. You didn't need to make an appointment. Big announcement ukuthi ngelanga elithize silalela icala lokuntshontshwa ini yakabani by umuntu othize ekuthiwa uyena ontshontshile. You didn't need to even children could attend. They would just be given their own space to sit at, because respect, common respect, was a norm. You didn't have to teach people respect. It was innate in how we did everything, even in how we engage with the environment, for the same reason as abantu abamnyama ithakazelo zethu iyilwane. So we didn't need to be taught by some foreigner from Europe about conservation. We conserved the ongoing existence of the different species, because Nake Tao, which means lion. So if you belong to the Tao clan, you cannot kill or harm a lion. And so others can, but your job is to preserve and manage the population of the lion. Okay, there's too much lion killing, you do that. Others, isithakazelo sakhe is a snake, inyoka, omunye is a rabbit, omunye ikundwane, omunye indlovu. And so we had a way of naturally balancing our ecology, our ecosystems, because we have to balance our ecosystems. Otherwise, we have these problems that are alleged now about the climate, etc. But the point is, we've moved very far from our almost, can I say, natural ancestral way of governing ourselves, which is a big part of democracy, of people governing themselves. When you govern yourself, you tend to take responsibility much easier. You tend to participate much freely, because akunamuntu okufostayo. Abadingi ukuthi bakufoste, because you know that should you not go and participate, laba abafikile bayahlala lapha in the lekgotla egumeni or wherever, ibona bazothatha isinqumo ngoba bafikile. So you end up understanding ukuthi, okay, if I don't participate, certain things are going to happen engingavumelani nazo. And ngizoba ngiyanga khona in that meeting ngiyofaka my own, you know, opinion or rather experience about how I believe that decision should be taken or which decision should be taken. And so it's not even about these big words. We understand that majority of these big words are taken from precisely our indigenous systems. It's like mathematics and science. It originated in Africa. But now suddenly Africans are told, you know, they can't do math. Now, in the last 28 years, we've seen a decline in the understanding of mathematics. We even saw an introduction of something called mathematical literacy. Mathematics is not a difficult subject. Science is not a difficult subject. They are the easiest subjects on earth because they are nature, they're natural. You know, the alignment of the stars, the sun, the moon, all of that, how the weather patterns change, how each day evolves into 24 hours, how those hours are calculated, that's mathematics. And that knowledge in the southern hemisphere was basically anchored in Africa. And so it's not something difficult to learn and to understand. And so the social systems of governance stem from the natural sciences. Our culture as Africans is basically based on natural science. Our religion is based on natural science. Our belief systems are based on natural science. Our food, what we eat, our medicine, everything that we do is based on natural science. Like I made an example earlier, even our environmental management is also based on science, which is basically an understanding that human beings must interact neilwane. And in the process of interacting neilwane, being the superior beings to the animals, it's our responsibility to make sure the animals are protected and not, basically rendered extinct, etc. And so we understood how to maintain a fine balance between how much we consume from nature and how much we put back into nature.
It sounds like you're speaking decolonization.
Of course.
Of the current systems and going to a more Afrocentric way of governance. Is that the work that you guys are doing? And before we get to that work, my follow-up question to that, after you've answered that, I'd like us to speak about the current systems and its various structures, especially from a person in a neighborhood. What is their channel of reporting when they have issues? But let's start here. Are you guys promoting a decolonization of the political systems, maybe the legal systems, since you touched on justice, education, maths and science? Is that the work that you guys are doing? How long can we expect that to be done if that is the case?
So one of the things that needs to happen first, maybe if I can just be a bit technical, is that Parliament as it is now, National Assembly, the national parliament, not the provincial ones. Well, obviously they participate through other structures, but they're by and large not that effective, needs to process a bill, which is basically a draft law when it's still in development, to meet the requirements of the judgment, Judge Justice Madlanga. Yango 2020, the Electoral Act is unconstitutional.
The Electoral Act that we currently have, Joba's voter, it is unconstitutional.
It has been unconstitutional. It was understood to have been unconstitutional. In 1994, when they used it, there was a rush to go to the election. There was a rush to make black people feel like they are going to participate in their decision-making of their government. And so there was that whole one man, one vote thing. And so the technicalities then had to be compromised at some level.
Shortcut to fast-track.
To fast-track the actual putting of the X. For the same reason, the IEC, up to today, when they say they're doing education, they tell you that you must go and put an X next to the party that you like. I mean, there's nothing more destructive than that. What is it that you must like about the party? The logo? The slogan? The person who leads it? The songs, the toy-toying? That has nothing to do with your day-to-day life.
Even the fact that they put people's faces, I find personally, is slightly problematic.
It's even unconstitutional.
You think you're voting for a face.
It's part of the unconstitutionality because you are actually voting for the party. And it goes deeper. It even becomes worse. You're not even voting for the party because I'm a member of your party. Do not ultimately hold responsibility nor liability for the decisions that that party takes at a higher level. Because most parties will say that only the national structure has got the right to take the most critical decisions in relation to e-policy and everything related to policy and even implementation. So the power is given through the party list process that is listed in the Electoral Act currently. It's given to the top 6 of the political parties, not even the national structure. So the leadership structures, province, regional, whatever, however the party structures itself, branches that are ward-based, are not the ones taking the decision. Even worse, the Electoral Act is so silent on so many aspects of accountability. It's silent on many aspects of the quality and caliber of umuntu ozoba representative. Because currently you've got what is called party representative, which is PR. Yeah. They call it the PR system. You'll hear them talk about the PR system. They're basically talking about the list process, whether it's for parliament, legislature, or council. And so you don't have a decision. You have got no say in who the political party puts on that. All you do is vote, give the party the number, and then they take that number of votes, whether it's 500,000, 300,000, 1 million, 5 million, and divide it by the number of seats so that each party gets their representative. And their representative that the party sends is actually determined by members of the political party, right? Who get together in meetings or seminars or whatever they call conferences, which they call democratic, but they are essentially not democratic. The example that everyone can understand, like Galula, as 30 ward councillor, right? angithi siyazi ukuthi kune-ward councillor, kune-PR councillor at local level. Le ward councillor le, presumably wena mawuyicabanga, the way uyicabanga ngakhona, ngoba asiwafundi phela imithetho, le mithetho le, that's another problem. We don't read the laws that are in parliament that are governing us. You think ukuthi lo muntu omvotelayo uzoreporta kuwena, uzosebenza, uzoyenza izinto ezifunwa wena, even leyo ward councillor abafaka isithombe sayo, because of the party list process and the process of electing or nominating, rather, let me say nominating, because that's what the Electoral Act says, that person is not democratic. Let me tell you why. It's an example in a ward, lay ward ban, 90-something, right? Let's say there's a ward, whatever, let's say 96, 99, whatever, right? 99, I think, is Hyde Park, Craigo, ward Yaga Ramaphosa, right? Let's say we say ward 99, any ward 99 has got 17,000 registered voters, because that's like the average in Johannesburg, because the population is very dense and very high. So the actual population will be around 50,000 if the registered voters are around 17,000, right? We branch when as we pennualpoliticalparty.com. That's the name of your political party. Unama member e ward 99 out 300. The population does ward 99 ingaki between 30 and 50,000. Angithi iparty yakho inabantu abayi 300. In a ward where there's 50,000 people. The registered voters are 17,000. Angithi example yethu leyo. Eyakho iparty nama member ingaki 300. What is the percentage of 300 in 50,000? Let's say 30,000.
It's almost negligible.
What is the percentage of 300 in 17,000? Because your members will be registered voters, the 17,000 and khuluma naba votayo in the ward. By what is the percentage of 300 into 17,000, right? Your members are going to have a meeting that you refer to as democratic, which means a majority. Democracy is people rule. So that's what majority is. You know, that's what democracy is, majority rule, right? In a simplified way. Your 300 members are going to meet. What is the basis of the democratic meeting? You'll even have it in your guidelines. You'll say 50% plus minimum of one more person, which means 151 people minimum should attend that meeting. Wule 300 members yako wenozo to audit and everything. They then elect a ward councillor candidate amongst themselves. And then they put that candidate on a poster, and then you put the logo of pennualparty.com, and then you go to the elections, and those 17,000 people must vote for that person. Or votelwe, abantu abai 151. In a meeting, I don't want to go into the details. That meeting itself would have been toxic, by and large, because you would have lobbied.
Just the face on the poster.
Then we go to the gender question. The minute you start threatening each other, you start bullying each other, you start using money, who suffers first? Women.
Yeah.
Women cannot engage in violence. Black women in particular, all women generally cannot engage in violence. Very few women can successfully engage violently and win, because amadota have got 50% more muscle power than women. So it becomes unfair because you are not engaging on actions and ability, even intellectual ability. You are now engaging on muscle power. Then there's money that comes into play because abantu bakithi bayathengwa ukuze bavote. Now, that's the first problem in democracy, to a proportional representation.
Sorry to interrupt you. And I'm guessing this goes all the way up to national level.
To now the national.
Because I want to go back to this point you made about our Electoral Act being unconstitutional. I find that very disturbing for myself, and I'm finding myself asking, how did the judicial powers of this country allow this to go on for so long? Is it a matter of judges and lawyers will never act on what's illegal until someone opens a case? Is that what we're dealing with in this country? And is that how we're always going to be? Because that means our problems may be deeper than political. They may just have to do with common sense and logic.
Our problems are deep. Angithi ingani as participate. Ingani even when we voted in 94, we did not understand ukuthi besazi nje bese emotional. Besazi nje ukuthi kumele sikhipha amabhunu sifake umuntu omnyama. And then lo muntu omnyama esimfakayo yilo othi ulwile wabaleka waya eZambia. Angazi ukuthi eZambia bekulwiwa kanjani thina sihleli la singama stone throwers. Sisele nabo mama Winnie Mandela nabanye bebela who were brave enough to stick it out. And so we it's shame, and it's okay because Vele, that was always going to be our path. However, what is unforgivable on our own part, what we should never forgive ourselves for, is allowing this system to continue as it is, because we now know, we have seen the results. Angithi yabona, ngicela ukwenza example ngokuthi le council esivotelayo ikhethwe abantu abayi-few abangasi 1% ye-population ye-ward. West maso uya kwamanye ama-list we-province we-national sekuyiwa-ke ku-conference eyama-delegates nationally or provincially yaleyo party abazodecide ukuthi elistini-ke sifaka ubani. Majority of those meetings are basically emboldened by by one little thing, the incentive of getting a salary from the legislature and the council, and even the bigger incentive of partaking corruptly in the expenditure of taxes that are collected by SARS and given to municipalities and all state entities. Amatenda leo budget emele yenza umsebenzi, ekumele ithenge uniform yezikole, ekumele ikhokhele amabhasi for ama-no-fee schools, ekumele ikhokhele ibhedlela, ekumele yakhe imigwaqo, ekumele yenzeni ukuze kube nabantu abaphilayo eSouth Africa. And so we have seen repeatedly, year after year for 28 years, how wrong the system is. And we have participated nathi kuleyo system wrong. Lento oyibuzayo ukuthi umthetho wethu passive. In fact, awukho passive. Uyasho ukuthi no, anybody can challenge. Ingane New Nation movement went to the Constitutional Court. Sayiwina leyo case. Yaqale High Court, Western Cape High Court. Sayiluza. And then the Constitutional Court overturned on the basis that you cannot basically say that every person has an equal right. Excuse me, every person has an equal right, and every person has a right to vote, and every person has a right to be voted, and yet every person does not have a right to get onto the ballot as a person. Gumele participate politically, because that's literally what the Electoral Act says, that every person must join a political party, form a political party before they can politically engage. And yet there's a challenge as hlangani lezinto maso ubukela ama Bill of Rights, right? I think it's chapter 2 or chapter 6 of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, that says every person has equal political rights. Every person has got freedom of expression. Every person has freedom of association. Every person. The operative word, the key words is every person, not every group of persons.
Not every person in a political party.
In a group. Ngifuna simplify and say in a group. Whether it's a political party, it's an NGO, it's a company, sonto, whichever way you would have formed yourself, a cultural grouping, a language grouping, an artistic grouping.
That's not what it's
our rights, amalungelo wethu, are guaranteed for us as individuals. And therefore,
we have got so many lawyers in this country. We've got some judges. We've got so many law students. Abaye schooling, whether they end up qualifying and practicing is not important. Njobo ngitshela about the unconstitutionality of our current system that governs this country. You're telling me bonke labo bantu have either been ignorant of what they're studying, what they're practicing, or they've just turned a blind eye to it until now. Is that how scary it is? Because if we speak about something so fundamental to our democracy, I start fearing for our legal system and what it's built on. I start fearing for our economy, and that later on there might be some people who have some economic knowledge, financial knowledge, who are saying, you know, this entire system is actually corrupt. The South African Reserve Bank, for example, may be unconstitutional. Are we built as a nation on a foundation that arguably, if you look at, before we even question the Constitution, if we look at just the framework that's there, that is agreed on, that may not even be following the framework and the foundation that we have built this nation on and are running it on?
Firstly, the foundation itself is unconstitutional just in terms of the current constitution, whether we agree with the constitution or not. But lento ibuzayo ukuthi abantu abasebenza emthethweni, amaphoyisa wona, ama-public defender, ama-prosecutor, abameli, ama-judge, ama-magistrate, the whole gang right up to the Constitutional Court. Bayayiboni injustice yenzeka. You'll never find lawyers going door to door into communities as lawyers without expecting any financial reward. Ukuyofundisa abantu ukuthi, by the way, and this is a fact, right? Unalilungelo lokuthi if a constitutional right has been tampered with, uye e-constitutional court usho ukuthi anginayo imali nina kumele ningifundise mina ngifuna ukuzo-arguisha le point ngolwimi lami angiwazi ama-system wenu I don't know the process I don't understand kumele ngithi my lord my worship my what kumele ngiguqe ngime ngihlale kumele ngigcoke ithayi ngafika ngigcoke amaratha wami kumele ngigeze ngingagezi kumele ngikhulume kanjani unayo ilungelo according to the constitutional because the constitution says everybody has got right to equal justice. Now, when money comes in to the equal justice, before your court, I'll say now, the money takes away the right. It's unconstitutional for the courts to demand money of us when we go to court. I'm a lawyer themselves, bafuni mali. Fana nabo dokotela. It's the exact same thing. It's capitalism. Fana nabo dokotela. Abo dokotela take a Hippocratic oath to say ngizolapha noma ubani ofika lapha mngwami. Mina ngiharaswe igayini yami nje recently just to go and collect results from him. I'm still going to write a letter to the Health Professions Council of South Africa to complain about him because I want my money back. Just to collect my results after I've been to a consultation. Sekumele ngibhadale a full consultation fee
just to
collect my results. Odokotela nama lawyer are people who took oaths in their offices, including politicians, to say they will defend people no matter the reward.
Not defend people as long as they pay.
Defend, it's a constitutional right. You have a right to health. You have a right to safety, to basic shelter. You have a right to safety. You have a right to education. You have a right to justice. Unalilungelo lokuye court uthi anginayo imali ngiyahlupheka. There's been an injustice committed against me. Besides lele crime, bese kuthiwa no, if it's a civil lawsuit, ulwela indlu yakho mhlawumbe. Ulwela imoto yakho entshontshiwe kuthiwa that's civil kumele ukhokhe kanjani when the constitution doesn't distinguish i-constitution ayihlukisi my justice from criminal to civil yayizwa lento engishoyo constitution doesn't say you have a right to justice on condition that the question of justice is a criminal problem. If it's civil kumele ukhokhe ayisho njalo constitution. None of us has challenged that. I'm hoping and to influence the lobby in the New Nation movement that must be the next case, that we must be able to go to any court and get free representation. Le free representation oyitholayo from what is called legal aid, which is under the Department of Justice. We all know what happens there. Illegal aid ibolile nje yona ngokwayo. Very substandard. Extremely corrosive and toxic because lama lawyer alapha agijimelani ukuthi one day soon, because normally it happens to be mostly experienced lawyers who want to give back to society can work for legal aid, but mostly it's young lawyers who are fresh from their studies who need to gain experience in order to go into practice or prosecution, etc. But mostly they want to go into private practice because that's where they make a killing, as they say. So they will win every case. I've got someone, Mina, I know, who had the audacity to tell me to my face, ukuthi udefende umuntu o guilty, bekamazi ukuthi guilty. Confirmed ukuthi lo muntu uyenzile lento. Kodwa yena ebefuna ukuwina le case at all cost because ugijimela ukuqeda i2 years or 3 years yakhe legal aid so that akwazi ukuqala her private practice and then she can start charging top dollar, and her win rate in court is king. So lawyers are chasing wins. They're not chasing justice. They're not chasing the truth. We also have that problem. Yoguti, there must be an ethical question put to lawyers. Ukuthi mumazi lo muntu ukuthi udlwengulile, untshontsile, ubulele, umoleste ingane, wenzeni, uyishisile indlu, uyishisile isikolo. Are you ethically and morally bound to defend that person? Why should it be held against you if you know for a fact, without any doubt, we had evidence ukuthi lo muntu uyenzile lento? So bayahamba bakhulule umuntu oyoba yini? A serial killer, a serial rapist, serial arsonist, serial problem in society. And that is why we are sitting with these problems in our society where a lot of criminals go back because ba defendwa yini? Ila maloya apuma ku legal aid. Who are doing what? Chasing wins. Why? Because they want to quickly go and set up private practice. Why? So that they can quickly make money and drive Maybach or whatever it is. So our entire justice system, as move from the Electoral Act, that is already unconstitutional. CNJ to the entire judiciary and the entire justice, criminal justice system, which, by the way, is quite criminal, which in and of itself is also unconstitutional in the sense that it denies, our rights, to actually redeem our rights. Currently, there's this hot topic about the MEC as Limpopo or explainele waskula, an illegal person in the country is actually a criminal, right? I'm explaining lagahle, I'm khulumisa gahle. So, I do that. I do it with Zimbabweans all the time. I'm very popular in my area for that. Are you here legally? The place I do massages now and then, owned by a Chinese lady.
Is that not harassment?
No, it's not. This lady she's complaining to me. Why ukashama abantu abaphuma kwamanye amazwe abantu bokufika abanganamaphepha, because you are participating in a crime and you are robbing a South African of a job, right? The last time ngiyalaphaya ushayiwe, you one of those illegals. Makathi umvulela case, amaphoyisa athi kuye sizokuvulela case but siyobopha wena kuqala. Chinese lady who's here legally. Her business is registered.
Because you're also committing a crime by hiring undocumented.
Amapoyisa told her, she asked me to help her. I must help you to become more illegal every time illegals. So we are sitting with a problem where we have something called the South African Human Rights Commission. But the South African Human Rights Commission is very often engaged in anti-South African justice cases. They will even
defend illegality at times.
Illegal people in the country. Whether uzongibiza xenophobic or not, I really don't care, because mina ngikhule nogogo emakhaya. Ugogo owakhuliswa ngesintu like 100%. Besihlala sinabantu bokufika base Mozambique because we lived in Nelspruit on the farms. Labo bantu bebafika ngenhlonipho because they knew bebazazi ukuthi bafika eMozambique bebangakhuluma amanga like now. Uthola an illegal person ozofika athi uPenuel. Abe nane South African ID. I-ID yakhona izibe fake. Ayenze crimes in the modern day crimes and get away with those crimes. Mina, I cannot commit those crimes and get away because Home Affairs in my fingerprint wam. Ngine ID, ngine passport, ngine driver's license, ngine matric certificate, ngine degree, ngine ma diploma. Aliki pepe, ngine bond, ngine patalu gezi, ngine phone bill, ufika unami yonke. I can't run. I can't commit a crime. But abantu ba illegal can commit crimes, and then we wonder why our murder rates have shot up. We wonder why our crime rates have shot up. We wonder why also, because if angtolagali, obviously I'm going to commit a crime. The example I was making just as a parting shot, Uguti, isintu sethu besimnandi kabi ngoba besingabhalwanga whatever, kodwa wonke umuntu bekasihlonipha. Bengazi ukuthi mangisuka la amaZulu athi isigodi. Mangisuka la kulesigodi ngiya kuphi kuphi, kunenye inkosi ephethe lapha, kumele ngiyobika kuqala enkosini. Why? Because asinama ID sebenza ngesintu, ngenhlonipho nokuthembana nokuhloniphana. Ngiyazi ukuthi kumele ngisho ukuthi ngubani wakabani, ngilahlekile okanye I'm traveling somewhere far, I need a place to sleep over. People used to very often sleep over at my grandma's, strangers. People don't believe I grew up that way. My grandmother would give them a place to sleep because we knew, we trusted those systems. They were real, they worked. No muntu wakhona mehambe ekuseni anikwe nesikhaftini akhashwe nokukhashwa ukuthi no indlela uyifunayo eyalaphaya uyakhona naye.
Mandisa, thank you so much. I think just in closing, and I'm hoping that we can have more of these conversations, I'd just like you to paint a picture for the average South African. I live in a certain ward, there's potholes, there's crime. Just the different levels of politicians or political structures that I need to go through eventually to get to the president. I think we'll close there on today. I have a pothole in my ward. Where do I start? Where do I go from there?
Umune pothole, you should actually be able to contact your Nale ward councillor. That is because every ward has a ward councillor. Every ward.
Start at ward councillor level?
Well, of course, we all experience everything at local level. It doesn't matter whether it's a national policy. It falls under national governance in terms of finances, infrastructure. Kodwa ngiyigibela la ePhefeni or eSoshanguve or Mabopane station or Atteridgeville station. So I experience everything: water, is managed at a national level in terms of budgeting, housing. Kodwa ngihlala endlini la ewodini. So yonke into, actually we have an extremely dysfunctional system because local government is at its weakest. Majority of abomasipala eSouth Africa abasebenzi. In fact, umasipala kahle kahle mangichazela kumele ayenzeni. Umasipala kumelanga actually ayenze imali ngathi. Amakapha electricity, amakapha amanzi, locus increase. Okwamanje iDA is increase lama rates la eGauteng when unemployment is so high. Bacabanga ukuthi imali yokukhokha lama rates increase siyithatha phi. And so you should be able to go first and foremost to your ward councillor. Whether the issue is national, whatever, agnandab. I-ward councillor ngoba yona exists within this corruptible and unconstitutional electoral system. Right? Because noma usumkhethile, it's an electoral system that governs it. Yena kumele kube uyena odonsa umuntu oku province ngoba uyena oyaziyo ukuthi oh le i-province akumelanga abuye azobiza meeting athi no i-province akhomba bayakhombana even in the same party. In fact,
from ward councillor it goes to provincial.
Not necessarily. Get depend ukuthi issue ithini.
I'm trying to find the different levels.
I-ward councillor uma ngabe le ndaba izodinga i-mayor okanye u-MMC, which means member of the mayoral council committee. Uyena kumele abalethe ngokusheshsha futhi, not to delay, right? Ukuthi kunenkinga eso, and then mina, it's above me as a ward councillor, because a ward councillor is really nothing except umuntu who's an intermediary between the whole of government nabantu.
Yes.
Right? That is what basically politics is, right?
It's basically meant to be a neighborhood rep.
It's exactly representative yenu la.
Community leader.
Who must make it easy for you. Your ward councillor must even, if I understand how to access this court, that court, this agency, government, uyena okumele anthathe anise. Ukuthi okay, wozani ngapha labantu banenkinga eso anshiye lapho. So there should be government and there should be state, right? So the ward councillor is an intermediary between government and state. So state is basically like the courts, like the trains, like the people who provide water, electricity, that's state. The arm government, the section government ekuyiyona ethatha imithetho nama policy aphuma kule mithetho nama regulations aphuma kule mithetho and basically ayenza ukuthi le mithetho implement. That's what the state is. So the ward councillor should move you from government to state and make it easy for you. You shouldn't have to call even a call center because the ward councillor is a wardini. I-ward councillor iyakwazi ukuhamba i-ward yayo. I few ama-ward amakhulu to the extent that like maybe 20-kilometer radius, whatever, right? But majority wards, especially like Gauteng mancane, they are just densely populated. A ward councillor can walk from place to place, except for masekumele aniyise kwamasipala mhlambe office. But even the municipal infrastructure, shame noma singabablame amabhunu. Yazi amabhunu, they built municipal little offices. Uyazi ukuthi la kule section yethu ama-ward councillor even have offices where they can work, babe ne PA, ne administrator, babe ne phone, babe ne printer, babe ne. They have been given all those resources. But how many times uzwa abantu bathi cha i-ward councillor yami ithi hayi MMC, i-mayor, i-minister, hayi shem ukuze babone lawo ma-minister uzofika makazi ukuthi kuzoba nama-camera wase-TV. Makungana ma-camera wase-TV angeke azafiki.
From the mayor and the MMCs, before it gets to the president, who does it go to then?
So you've got a ward councillor, then you also have lama proportional representation councillor lawa afika ngama list, right? And ngawa voteli direct. Bese then you have the mayoral committee, kuyi executive ye laba ba manager ke politically umasipala, right? Abasebenzisana ne municipal manager laba baqashiwe. Namanye ama-manager nema-operational staff. Then we are moving. So I head to a mayor. If you metro, ibizwa executive mayor. If it's a normal district, ibizwa, I think even a district executive. And then if it's local, it's just a mayor. Then we are moving, we are go province. Le section le ngadingeki ngoba iyona ke eduplicator yonke into. Kahle kahle kumele ngabe une local, ube ne national. Finish. Ngoba i-national ayenzi lutho. Ibeka imithetho to manage imali. Imithetho ezodivide imali, ama-policy aphuma kuleyo mthetho, nama-regulations aphuma kuleyo mthetho, ashoyo ukuthi le mali kumele imanejwe kanjani, and then nayi ne-plan ye-government ukuthi for this year senza ukuthi la kule department siyospenda so much, ba-monitora lokho bona-ke governance. But from i-local, bese uya ku-province, ku-province uthola i-legislature futhi, it's like a mini parliament, and then inama-members of provincial legislature bizwa ama-MPL, and then again nayo iba ne-premier, so it's like a mayor, and then even now ama councillor ama MPL, right? But lapho ke wonke ama MPL akunakuthi lo ward councillor lo PR. bonke ba ama MPL, and then kuba ne premier nayo njenge mayor izoba ne executive yayo okuama MEC, members of the executive committee, ku local babizwa ama members of mayoral committee, and then at provincial is members of executive committee, and then the premier ba reporta lapha ku legislature bayenza wona lo msebenzi ukuthatha le mali abayithola ku national okanye abanye bayazitholela called self generated revenue, and then implement their own provincial. Most of the time the provinces are actually implementing programs as a national under what is called the conditional grant, which means nationally kunikeza le mali on condition you only spend it on this. And if you spend it on something else, it's wrong. Then you move up to national, same exactly like province, over nama members of parliament, MPs. Again, there's no like PR and ward councillor like local, ama MPs wonke, and then gubonage bayaketa kona la paparat. That's another thing. People think they are electing a president. They are not electing a president, even if his picture is on the poster. You are electing the party. Uyo nominate wala paya in National Assembly aketwe yilabo bantu abayi 400. Okay, already ufagwe elistini by a very small minority. So you see how undemocratic our democracy is. And then ama MPs, and then ama minister. And then bese kuba nama deputy minister, nabanye bamasipala banabo ma deputy mayor, but they don't have deputy MMCs and they don't have deputy MECs at provincial level. But at national kunama deputy minister, akunamuntu owaziyo ukuthi ayenzani lama minister. I think there's maybe 100 of them, 80 something or 100 angibazi. Baningi kakhulu. Sinama department amaningi nje kungaziwa ukuthi ayenzani. Right? And then bona ke bazolidwa yini a deputy president again. O leader wasazi ukuthi kwenziwani ku deputy president level, bese siba nale president ekuyona decide ukusijova ngemijovo ye president recently, and no one, not even one single, well, there are MPs that objected, I'm wrong, there are a few political parties, I think I know 2 that objected, at least they had the decency. We must always give credit where it's to Freedom Front Plus name, ne ACTP, and bayimela into yabo. I participated in several debates when it wasn't popular in 2020, objecting to this thing nabo. So shame, we must always hats off to them. But majority yabo bahlala lapha. Instead, I think they were hoping to gain from ama PP yini bebazibiza leza zinto protection what, and then I think bebafuna ke abanye bebafuna ukuthola ama commission ngoba bese bathengisa balwela baze bawatoyitoyela ama vaccine ukuthi thengisani vaccine yase Russia, thengisani vaccine yase China. Ba participate ke kuleyo doti leyo, and asikeka bayise court. In fact, we need to take them to court. So before you get to the president, you are going to go through 3 basically layers of governance, oversight governance, which is legislature and council and national assembly. National assembly is parliament. And then you're going to go through quite a lot of people. Abangenayo i-constituency abaphiwe yona ukuthi uzosebenza la na indawo yakho yokusebenza. Kodwa bayayithola constituency funding. I know it because I managed such a system. I was responsible under a party, of course, for managing on behalf of the party at national level such a system where banikwa ama constituency funds per MP and per MPL imali eningabi, kodwa leyo mali akekho nomuntu oyedwa ovotele iparty onelungelo lokuyobuza leyo party ukuthi nithole malini ku constituency funding. La ku constituency yami, okay, nithola a constituency, it's a demographic, geographically cut. So it's like saying a ward or a municipality. Yeah, so it's basically the community ehlala in that geographically demarcated area. Le ekhathiwe kwathiwa le ndawo le constituency X. Ikhona isystem yakhona on paper, but it doesn't exist in practice. And then bathola ne political party funding at provincial and national level. Kodwa ngeke into bazokutshela yona ukuthi leyo mali isetshenziswela ukuyo contestela ukhetho futhi ama poster ama t-shirt nanani imanifesto banibize nize rallyini njengoba sivamisa ukunibiza sintshela ukuthi siyonenzelani. Kodwa aninalo ilungelo lokubuya during the 5 years ningibuza ukuthi how utheni nizoyenza lokhu nalokhu. Why ningakwenzanga? Okay, if you're not governing, you can say, well, I'm not governing, but I can try. I'm going to push those who are governing. But those who are governing, I've never seen community members ahamba yobuza any governing party, whether a Western Cape or the other provinces, as per DA ne ANC, ukuthi okay, nathi nizoyenza ukuthi nokuthi lokhu ku how far, lokhu kuguphi. Actually, lokhu nalokhu anikwenzanga. We should actually be that meritocratic. We should say, na manifesto yenu niwinile na thola ama minister nantontoni azange nikwenze konke lokhu mina ngisandvoteli. Shouldn't be emotional.
Mandisa, thank you so much. I think we still have a lot to uncover. I've got so many questions, I think, from a layman's perspective about some of the concepts, because obviously from my side, I understand a lot of them. So it's easy for me to just accept. But other people might sit outside and be like, yeah, khulume PR, no, MPL. I still don't get it, and it probably needs to be unpacked even further. So I'm hoping that in some of the conversations we have moving forward, we go on a granular level of discussion. I love the conversation around the decolonization of politics, of the law, of the economy. It seems like more than anything we need education. And I'm hoping that using this platform and others, because I know there are funds out there that are meant to be paying for education, we can access some of those funds. If not to give people free data to watch our conversations, for us to be able to travel and have conversations with people on the ground, with groups, and get them to actually explain to us if they actually understand how the structures work and what they would like. If we're speaking about the people should govern, and everyone is agreeing all the way up to the president that the people must govern, then it's about time that some of us actually make that happen and then take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I don't know if I can add this. I really would like those Vox boxes. So maybe you should organize a sponsor, or I should.
Vox Pox.
Yeah, singene kuma community. Sibabuze ukuthi bona bafuna ukwazi ini nani.
Yeah.
Siyenze live in every community. Like Gauteng, it's easy. We can do Joburg, siye Pretoria, siye Kurleni, siye Eval, which is called Sidibeng, and then siye West Rand. We just decide to pick any township, mostly townships na CBT. Sibabuze ukuthi bafuna ukwazi ini. Or even have a session like this, or even have a lecture. So I definitely
sometimes it's ngabacabangeli, because one of the mistakes we make is we always think we know what they want. Kanti they might actually be like, to be honest, these are our views, and we might be shocked, and we might actually learn a lot from them.
Exactly,
as well.
Exactly. In fact, the one area that I think you should next time we should talk about is that clause that I would like to read out to people in the Electoral Act that says that the IEC is supposed to take proposals from any organization in communities that is willing to educate communities about democracy and electoral systems. But they've never put it to use.
Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.